Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. When Bill says Pennsylvania is having similar problems as it did in 2020, it is quite close if you go back and look at it. There was a dispute decided about ballot deadlines in 2020 by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The majority there said that because of COVID and postal delays, they were going to waive the deadline for mail ballots to be delivered. Instead of having to get them to the election office by Election Day, they were going to let them come in up to 3 days late if they had postmarks on them showing that they were dropped off at the Postal Service on time. And even if they didn't have postmarks, they said if they come within 3 days, we're going to assume that they were mailed on time. That then went to the U.S. Supreme Court. Justice Alito, in that case, did order those ballots to be segregated and set aside. In the end, they were not counted. But, Monet, about 11,000 late mail votes came in 2020 in Pennsylvania. Nearly 700 of them did not have postmarks, even though the Postal Service's policy is for all of those ballots to be getting postmarks. And so that is, we almost had the dire situation that we're laying out here because President Biden carried Pennsylvania by about 81,000 votes. If it were 10,000 or 20,000, these late mail ballots would have been a real big explosive issue. And I take Bill's point. I think that the Florida reforms might be a model. Unfortunately, in Pennsylvania, they have divided government, so they have not been able to overhaul their election rules since 2020. But after this, boy, it certainly looks like Pennsylvania is overdue for that.
Yeah, and I frankly think that among all of the election fraud conspiracies that floated around after 2020, the most valid critique that a lot of people on the right had about how those elections were run was not only the counting of late ballots and other things that traditionally would have fallen afoul of standard election rules, but the fact that those rules were changed at the last minute by these state Supreme Courts, with Pennsylvania being the most egregious case. And obviously is a lot of leeway for states to be able to determine how their elections are going to be conducted. That's part of the tradition of how federal elections have always gone in this country. But there should also be assurance on the part of voters that we're not going to have judiciaries intervening at the last moment to change the way that the rules are playing out. And frankly, I think that, yes, as you said, Pennsylvania has divided government. They haven't been able to update their laws. We've also seen their Secretary of State, Al Schmidt, who's in charge of administering these elections, defending these practices and brushing off all the criticisms coming from the Trump campaign and others as fear-mongering. That's not accurate at all. And we have seen really grave problems of judicial overreach in Pennsylvania, and they and a few other states need to finally be able to pass legislation to standardize how their elections are going to take place and curb the leeway that the judges have to be able to intervene in these very influential ways late in the campaign season.
Bill, we'll give you the last word, but I mean, I think there's some of both at times. I think there are a lot of theories that were circulated by President Trump in 2020 that were not borne out if you actually went and looked at the evidence, if you looked at the data, the voting data, if you went and looked at the court cases, the claims that the Trump campaign was making in court that judges were dealing with and rejecting. But I do think that there is plenty of room for real criticism of the way that some of these states are running their operations. And by the way, we may be in for a 2020 repeat there as well, given how slowly some of these states are counting their votes and the partisan gap that shows that Democrats, by and large, vote early and vote by mail more often than Republicans do, which leads to this situation we saw in 2020, we might see again, where Republican candidates look like they're ahead when those election day votes that are faster to count come in, and then you start getting those dribs and drabs of mail ballots. So I'm hoping that I'm wrong, Bill, and maybe the margin will be big enough that we won't have a repeat of that, but it could be not an election night result, but an election week result.
Yeah, I think given the technology today, given the states that have implemented systems to ensure all votes are counted and they're counted accurately on the first night, it is something we can do. And the only reason some places aren't doing it is willfulness and obstruction. There's no reason this shouldn't be done, should be the norm. With all our advantages, we should be able to guarantee the system. But as you point out, there's political forces that decide which voters favor which candidates. And so I think, Donald Trump's claims about a stolen election and rigged, they were kind of crude in the idea of bringing down boxes of ballots and counting them and so forth. He did have a case, as you're suggesting, that the system, the rules changes at the end, which Democrats lawfully took advantage of, favored them, and meant that a lot of people that went to bed thinking Trump had won woke up and found that he didn't. But again, anyone who's in politics should be committed absolutely to election integrity and fast, timely, accurate results.
Thank you, Bill and Monet. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.